What's up everyone, Darcblade here bringing you my video review for The Last of Us DLC, Left Behind. The Left Behind DLC was released February the 14th, 2014. Now before I get into the heart of the review, I want to warn you that there will be a few spoilers in regards to the story of The Last of Us. But I'm going to try to avoid major spoilers for the actual Left Behind DLC. Now, the Left Behind DLC adds a new chapter to The Last of Us, but it tells actually two stories. There's two story arcs going on in the Left Behind DLC. These stories are non-linear and intertwine as you play the DLC. The first story arc that the Left Behind tells is what happens after Joel and Ellie meet David's group for the first time in the University of Colorado. It shows how Ellie has to go about helping Joel after he's been wounded. The second story arc is about Ellie and her friend Riley. If you've read the American Dreams comics for The Last of Us, basically this part of the story fills in the gap between the American Dreams comics and the main events of The Last of Us. Both these stories shed additional light on The Last of Us story, especially when it comes to Ellie's friend Riley. The story with Riley and Ellie is really told well and sheds additional light on their friendship. Also, the Left Behind DLC gives some context to the ending of The Last of Us, thanks to the fact that you actually know and see and experience who Riley is. I know if you never read the American Dream comics, or didn't really pay any attention to the artifacts in The Last of Us, then the ending to The Last of Us could be a bit confusing, because Ellie does mention Riley. And now, thanks to the DLC, you'll get some understanding of what she's on about. Out of the two stories, like I said, I do feel that the flashback to Ellie and Riley's story was the better one. It was more story based, there was a lot more dialogue, and the interaction between Ellie and Riley was outstanding. There is some real emotion in the actors' performances of both these characters. There are bits that you'll find very charming, and then there are bits that are actually quite sad. The story set where Ellie is looking after Joel, though, is a lot slower paced in terms of story. There isn't actually that much story. The only real story you get is picking up audio logs from a crashed helicopter crew. Now, as for gameplay, the gameplay is pretty much the same as The Last of Us. If you want full in-depth detail of how the game plays, then you can check out my previous review for The Last of Us. However, for this DLC you play entirely as Ellie. You don't play as Joel at all in this DLC. For the storyline set where you're looking after Joel, Ellie functions a lot like she does in the main Last of Us game, picking up supplies, crafting weapons, crafting items, so on and so forth. There is also a lot more combat in this part of the story. You'll take on hunters from David's group, you'll take on clickers, as well as other infected enemies. This can all be done with a gun-ho attitude, or like I like to play, a very stealthy approach. It really also depends on what difficulty you're playing on to which approach works better as well. The gameplay in the flashback story with Riley and Ellie is a lot slower paced. There's not much action, you don't really get to craft items, and there isn't really much gunplay at all. Ellie doesn't even have a gun in this part of the story. The flashback story is really all about the story rather than the gameplay. As for the presentation, this is a very good looking DLC. It looks just as good as the main game. I can't knock it at all. Very good for what is now the last generation of consoles as well. Like I said in my Last of Us review, this game and this DLC really does push the PlayStation 3 to its limits in terms of graphics. The sound and voice acting is superb. Like I mentioned before, the actors do a superb job of portraying their characters. There are some moments in the game where it gets incredibly silent, but I feel this actually adds to the tension of the game sometimes. Overall, I thought this was a great DLC. For me personally, it lasted between 2 to 3 hours, but this was playing on the normal difficulty. If you were playing on harder difficulties, it might last you a little bit longer. If you're playing on easier difficulties, it might be quicker. But if you want to try to experience everything and explore everything, get every additional conversation, then you're looking at 2 to 3 hours. The only criticism you might have about this is the price. With $14.99, or I think that's about £10 in the UK, it could be considered a little bit steep. But for what you get, in my opinion, it's well worth it. This adds a great additional chapter to the already great Last of Us story, and it puts some context to the main Last of Us story as well, which I think is great. The two story arcs intertwine really well. The storyline where Ellie is looking after Joel is great in terms of gameplay, while the flashback storyline with Ellie and Riley is great in terms of story. These combined together make a great little package, and in my opinion is well worth checking out. Anyway, I've been Darcblade bringing you my video review to The Last of Us DLC Left Behind. Hope you enjoyed the video, thanks for watching, subscribe and like for more.
dumb.
Oh, come on. When have we ever gotten into trouble?